just to bring us up to speed. So we were talking previously about creativity being like why it's so cool in all areas of life, like as a problem solving, anything that we're up to in life. So parenting, in work, in business, dating, eating, thinking of things to do on lockdown, deciding what to cook. Like there's so many examples of where we are creative in life, where a creative something moves through us in life, in our work, in our relationships, in our day-to-day lives. So there's nobody that gets out of being creative. Basically it applies to everyone who's watching, everyone who's listening. There is no get out of being creative because we're all born into a world of thought. So from the minute we open our eyes, we're a creative generator. We're an experience of a world outside of us is being created constantly, all the time. So yeah, this is totally relevant to everybody, as we talked about, not just the artists and the writers and the poets. And so we were talking before about the source of creativity, what creativity is. But I wanted to just kick off by asking you to speak a little bit about, what gets in the way of it. Like you see it over and over again. When I listen to your podcasts, I was listening to one this morning actually, when I listen to your podcast, I hear stories of entrepreneurs who give examples of being blocked and then the flow opening up again. What is it that gets in the way in your mind?
Well, that's a fun question and could be endless answers, right? But I'm going to say it in a way that people often talk about it. So, and then I want to offer a new way. So what people often talk about getting in the way is their personality, their lack of discipline, their relationships, their boss, their inability to make a change because they're stuck for some reason, either because of finances or lack of skill set, or they're just afraid. A lot of people will talk about having this kind of inner saboteur that they have to, be leery of. I don't know how, like there are endless. And by the way, I think I've said all of them.
Yeah.
One time or another, it looks like those things are there. But what's been so liberating and amazing is to go back to what we said, like, let's keep it simple. The only thing between me and the knowing of my creative internal self, of my ability to rise to the occasion, of being able to do well in the unknown, of getting in over my head, of any of that, is an illusion of thought. Yeah. The only thing between the experience of my amazing, innate, true nature in this moment is thought. So when you look at, rather than talking about the type of insecure thought, like, and this is what I think is always so fascinating, like people can get so into talking about their garden variety of insecure thinking. Mm-hmm. Yet it's so powerful when we just say, oh, it's just insecure thought.
Yeah, like you put under that label. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that would be insecure thought then. Oh yeah, that is one diagnosis.
It's true. Like I remember when I first was learning this, and I was living in Paris at the time, and I had just started working with Michael, and he was sending me different things to listen to. And I heard Sydney Banks say, at the bottom of every disturbed mind is an insecure thought. And I protested that so much when I heard that. I'm like, it's not true. I'm not insecure. I don't, that's not my issue. I have a lot of other issues, but that's not, and it just annoyed me. So every time I heard that word, and you'd hear it kind of often, like an insecurity, and I'd be like, it totally should have been a warning signal, right? But I would get totally annoyed by it. But when I began to look at what you and I are saying, like the simple yet truthful, powerful realization, like, oh, it's all insecure thought. it was so liberating because it wasn't complex. I had it all compartmentalized and all different things needed for different issues. And when I realized, oh, it's all thought, it's all a version of thought. It's all, and the disturbed ones at their essence, the root of it is an insecure thought.
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, who knew that seeing that for what it was like would be so liberating? Because then you realize, oh, I'm not really up against a fixed personality. I'm not up against this boogie monster of a subconscious saboteur. I'm not up against my past and my upbringing. You know, like before, there were just like endless blocks and issues. But when you see, oh, I'm not up against an issue unless I just feel an experience of limitation in that moment. That's it. And that's coming via thought, not really up against a personality, you know? I'm not up against my past. I'm just experiencing memory coming to life right now via thought. You know, oh, I'm not up against an issue. I'm just looking to my past and experiencing it right now as a limitation. You know, again, it just keeps it really simple. Well, you know I've shared this story with you, but it really struck me when I started to realize my personality wasn't fixed, that issues are nothing more than an experience being brought to life via thought in a moment. And I was working with a mentee, and we were working with one of her clients, and we had been together for a couple of days. And on the third day, the mentee said to me before we start, well, when are we going to get to her self-worth issue? And I was like, what's self-worth issue? You know, I'm like, I haven't seen that. And we had these really in-depth conversations, and her self-worth had never come up. And so I said, well, let's just see what happens, right? Well, we get into the session, and sure enough, all at one point, the client starts to talk about her mom. And then she starts to get really down. Her mood just plummets. And then she starts to get emotional, and she says, I have a self-worth issue. But because we had this rapport and this really good connection, and we had spent a couple days together, what occurred to me to say, I said to her, now this might sound really weird, so bear with me. I said, but did you have a self-worth issue 5 minutes ago? And it was fascinating to watch her first be like, what? And then, because she had been looking at thought, right? She had been looking at how we experience thought vibrantly through our, senses. She's got this smile, and she said, no. And we both just started to laugh. And really, when self-worth or lack of self-worth wasn't on her mind, wasn't in her reality. Yeah. It wasn't even there. It was only there the moment she started to look at familiar conditioned ideas about herself and her relationship with her mom. So it wasn't this like issue to overcome. It was a momentary experience of an idea, of a concept, of a mental construct. And when she started to see, oh, I don't really have a self-worth issue, like it changed everything for her. Now, did it resolve all of her mom relationship? No, but it changed the relationship to it. It no longer looked like this internal hurdle. It looked like just a momentary experience of thought.
Yeah, and it knocks the legs out of the idea that I can't do the things I'd love to do in life because of my self-worth issue. When you see that self-worth issue isn't permanent, it's a temporary experience. So what about you, as you were talking, you're bringing to mind a discussion I'd seen going on in my Facebook group today, where someone had been saying, but I have diabetes, and because of that I sometimes I'm capable of doing this, and sometimes I can't do that, and sometimes I'm get really worried and stressed by it, and sometimes I'm not, and sometimes it's to do with my sugar levels, and sometimes it's not, and I've had diabetes for like 20 years, and it creates all these problems. And it struck me that even when there's a real thing, like you can't get a self-worth, like it's not tangible, right? But like, no, diabetes, that's a real thing. And it just struck me that, yeah, you can have diabetes. And then your experience of life fluctuates the same as everybody else. And what's even weirder to consider is that diabetes only exists in the moment that you consider it. Now, is there always something fundamentally going wrong or misfiring in your body? Excuse my technical knowledge of diabetes, right? But is there like a chemical imbalance in your body? Yeah, maybe permanently. Mm-hmm. But that has nothing to do. It only exists in your consciousness while you think about it. Yeah. So every single thing that you came up with before about the reasons why the creativity gets plugged, if you like why does it stop flowing? Why am I not capable of being creative generally? Every single one of those is like only exists in the moment you think about it. Yeah. It's not true.
And it's, again, like, if people really take a moment here to consider this, it's a game changer. Because, you know, I remember when I had an abscess tooth, and I'm kind of, you know, we didn't go to the doctors much when I was growing up, so I'm always kind of I always think I can fix things myself. So I'm like chewing on cloves and garlic trying to, and then I wake up and it literally is the size of a lemon, and I'm like, oh, I guess I should go to the dentist. And I, you know, walk into the dentist, and he's like, his eyes get all buggy. And anyway, I waited way too long. But the pain was so intense. But I remember during that time, that intensity was a variable.
Yeah.
There were times when the pain was on my mind and I would feel it more intensely. There were times when the pain wasn't on my mind at all. Now the infection was there the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, so again, it's just another example of what you're talking about. You know, it's like, in the times my pain wasn't on my mind, it wasn't in my reality. It wasn't a limitation. It wasn't a thing, right? And the other point I want to make here is I remember interviewing Mara for the podcast a couple years ago early on. And she said something that was really cool and helpful to me even, you know. She said that when she first started out, she thought her age was a limitation, right? Because she was really young and she'd go into these companies and she was, you know, in their young 20s, and these men and women were all in their 50s, which is young, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, yeah. But she said that in a way her age entered the room before she did. Mm. Her age was on her mind. And then because of how it works, then it looked like age was a limitation. But it was only a limitation because to the level that it was on her mind and it looked like a limitation, right? But once she started to see that was happening via thought, that age as a limitation was a construct, that people wouldn't respect her because of her age was just a thought, that, you know, she didn't have enough experience and they were judging that, when she really saw, like, you know, an honest reflection of, wait, this has to be thought, this has to be. Then all of a sudden her experience she started to not like that, what didn't have as weighty of a presence, right? Yeah. It didn't have. And then, so her experiences in those meetings literally changed. Her experience changed, right? You know, but in her, the day before, she would have been arguing that she's not as respected because of her age. But
and give you the evidence for it too.
Yes. Yeah. But then once she saw it and it blew up, when that thought would come through again, it didn't have the.
Yeah, so that's what I want to kind of cycle back around to, and that's a great example of it. So at the beginning we were saying, like you were saying, all of the things that get in the way, you know, and I'd written down one word in my mind as the answer to that question, which, like, what blocks creativity? With fear. And you're like, insecure thought. I love that even more, right? Because it's so impersonal.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we were talking about in the previous sessions, which is, you know, that when we look at the impersonal nature, like, I have self-worth issues, it's because of my husband, I'm just not brave enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not the sort of person who, like, those are very personal. They're really personal, tight, constricted. They're about me, and it feels like I need to figure out these things about me, and then I'll be free. But when you said about, no, that's just insecure thought. Let's look at the nature of insecure thought. It takes it off me. It takes it into like, oh, but that everyone has that. Yeah, everyone has that. Let's talk about that as a human thing, right? As a psychological thing. Like, what can we see about insecure thought? And in that opening up, which again we talked about, that opening up, we get philosophical and it's impersonal, there becomes a space in which we get to consider and be reflective about this impersonal thing, this insecure thing. And one of the questions that I'm sure people will have been thinking when you were talking about it is, okay, yeah, I have it. Yeah, I see it's insecure thought. So how do I make it be gone so that I can be creative and a blah, blah, blah. And I think what's, you know, just telling myself it's insecure thought, that's not helpful, right? But what I see in the story with Mara, and I've seen in my own experience, is that when we get a sense, something shifts in that understanding of the fact of it's insecure thought and we're all the same. We all work the same. We all have a creative flow, and then insecure thought kind of puts static in the system. It's like it puts the finger over the end of the hose in a way, right? And that's a given for all of us. If we start to see that it's impersonal, we all have that. There's something about seeing that doesn't make it go away, but changes your relationship to it. And that's a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
So many of my clients are trying to make their experience be gone. Yeah. And that's a 100% losing battle every single time. So Mara's example there wasn't that she made the thought, I'm too young for them to take me seriously, go away. She didn't even have an insight that banished it. It was just that when it showed up next time, it looked different. And therefore, when she showed up next time, she didn't take it so seriously. Yeah. So she's able to almost, what I love is you're almost like, when you see something about the nature of thought, you become able to kind of back thoughts to one side and carry on anyway. You don't need the thought to be gone. It just holds less weight with understanding.
Well, I remember you and I, when you were up in La Conner one time having this conversation, that I realized I would get asked to do something like give a talk, be on a webinar, do something. And I would get so excited, be like, yes. And then at some point between the time I said yes and the event, I was thinking, how could I get out of it? I was like, oh, why did I say yes? Oh my God, what if it sucks? I don't know what I did. I don't know what
You're the only person that ever does that.
Yeah, right? But one day I realized I do that every single time. And then I thought, now I do the thing, even though I spent a lot of time wondering if I could get out of it and thinking of ideas of how I could. And, you know, like that was all, I ended up always doing the thing for the most part. Mm. But when I saw, oh, I do that.
Yeah.
I have these moments of intense insecurity, and then it changed the relationship, to your point. Then when it came, it was like it didn't stop me in my tracks. It didn't, you know, I'm like, oh, hi, you again? Okay, go ahead, have fun. You know what I mean? It was like a totally different relationship to it. Now, that happens a heck of a lot less now, right? But there are times, especially when I'm trying something maybe I haven't done, that I will go, why did you say yes to that? Or what are you thinking? But I just don't take it to heart. I can't get behind it.
So helpful to me when I heard you talk about that, because I was working with a lot of business owners at the time. Obviously, I run a business. And what I used to do is I would get a creative idea, I'd get inspired, I'd take 2 steps forward, I'd have that experience of self-doubt and I'd pull it. I would back out. Right? So many programs I created and then pulled, right? Or so many programs that I got really, and because I act quite quickly, I would create the whole program and then I'd have to take it all down very quickly. And when you shared with me, oh, that's just a human thing. I saw the humanness of that. And I can, like, it came to mind for the first time, oh, what would happen if I carried on? And I didn't just pull it or back out because of fear. And what I found was that, and I see this so many times with clients as well, where they'll come to me and say, and you must see this all the time with business owners, I had this great idea and I said I was going to do it and I've regretted it ever since, and I don't know, there's something wrong with me. And I was like, well, and they're like, yeah, but I've got to sort it. Like if you think that that's going to, if you think that taking 2 steps forwards, getting fearful and then carrying on, like if you're not up for that game, you're in the wrong business, because that's just what happens when you're an entrepreneur. Like over and over and over again, like that's part of the journey. Get inspired, take 2 steps, get fearful, think you shouldn't have done it. And then you either opt out or carry on. And if you understand the nature of thought, you get to sidestep it and carry on. And I remember when you shared that with me, it really freed me up to be, oh, thank God for that. I can just freak out and think it's a terrible idea and want to try and get out of it. I don't have to make that thinking go away. And I don't have to have it not show up in order to know that this is something that I want to move forward to. I can just accept it in the same way that if I was going to move forward with a project and then I don't know, I got a cold, like it's irrelevant to me moving forward with the project. And then the other thing I heard you say, which really you reminded me of when you were talking about it, and I think this might actually be the thing we talked about in Lacona, was I heard you talking, it was with George and Linda, I think. And you said that George had said something to you, and then you went home and you watched a movie and you had an insight, and the insight was, oh my goodness, I rain on my own parade. You remember that? Gives me goosebumps now, because it really, like, oh my goodness, I do that all the time. And there's something about the recognizing, you do that? Oh my goodness, I do that. The recognizing of it, and then seeing that the seeing of it changes everything.
Yeah, and the raining on my parade was with really reasonable, rational thinking. So it didn't look like thought. It didn't look like self-doubt, because it wasn't that intense. Why did I say yes? Example, it was these, oh, it's not ready, or no one's really interested in that. And, it didn't have an intense kind of, and then, but when I saw it, I'm like, oh, it's self-doubt.
Yeah.
Thought. It's just thought. And you're right. It was like, oh, I rain on my parade. And that insight has like served me over and over and over again. And you start to see, what if self-doubt, what if fear, what if insecurity doesn't have to be a deal breaker? Just, like we can experience all of that and keep moving. None of those are deal breakers.
Yeah, and the other thing that I love as well in this conversation, and someone was, again, in my Facebook group today, someone was asking about this, someone that's pretty new to the conversation, but I've heard it a lot of times, right? Well, we have this creative flow, and we are of this source of energy. And then thought comes along and fucks the whole thing up. Like, why thought? Like, why it's evil thought? Like, thought is the bad guy. It has to be got rid of. And if we could just get rid of thought, then we'd be in flow all the time. Like, why thought? And the swearing was my bit, not their bit, I have to say, in case they listen. But it's like, we consider that thought is the bad guy. But for thought, we'd just be in flow all the time. Mm-hmm. And so if you then go into battle with thought. Like, I need to have less thought, I need to have no thought, I need to get rid of thought. I keep hearing about having a quiet mind. I keep seeing that thought is the only thing that can get in the way of me and a beautiful feeling. Like thought, insecure thought, bad guy thought. And what's become more apparent to me over the last year is, oh my goodness, the beauty of thought. No thought, no life. No thought, no Barb, right? Like, what a shame that would be, right? No thought, no children, no flowers, no nature, no planet, no movement, no dance, no song, no experience of life. And insecure thought is one of the many flavors. It's like the purple streak on the rainbow.
Yeah.
Right? It's just one, like there's a purple, there's a yellow, orange, red, green, blue, and they're all different flavors, and sometimes one is brighter than the other, and sometimes they're not there at all, and it just fluctuates the whole time. It's just one of many flavors of thought.
Yeah, I so love that you're talking about this because, you know, first of all, I think the understanding, one of the amazing gifts it's given me is to be able to experience the full range of the human experience. You know, not like we said yesterday, not, you know, narrowing my experience of life or myself because I only like these kind of things, you know. When we see thought, we understand the fluid nature of it. We understand that it's coming to life, it's energy coming to life via thought, but it's movable. And beyond that is this amazing life force of who we are, this creative potential. Like, when you appreciate the full picture of who we are, we surf our experiences rather than getting whipped around by them. That's an analogy, right? Sometimes I'm whipped around by my experience. But what I want to say about that is, I know that this idea that the spiritual nature is it's the point, it's the hierarchy, it's the way, it's the better, that's thought too. That is made up. You know, in a way, I think as humans, we are the intersection of the form and the formless. We are the form and the formless. We are this amazing, immense, creative, spiritual nature. And we are this form with skin and preferences and taste and personalities. And, you know, the nice thing to know is all that's fluid, like we've said. But I agree with you. I think that sometimes people can make the spiritual the better place. And I'm with you. I'm like, oh, no, like all of it.
Yes,
All of it.
So different. When you think the aim of the game, right? The aim of the game is, if I really understood the principles, I'd be totally zen, and I'd be like, there would be creative things coming out of me all the time, right? I would live in flow. I'd be really zen, and I wouldn't argue with my kids anymore. Yeah. Right? We all have a secret hidden, like, if I really got the principles then. And then we have an idea in the world of form of what that looks like. But like you say, it's an idea, it's a thought. Again, it's just a construct that we've made up. We have an idea of, like, if I get the principles, then idea of something in the form. And that's not true either.